Hello, how are you doing?
Good. Part two of our
Yes.
action-packed two-part episode in reverse chronological order. So we just had an interview with Sandy for episode 341, and now we're going to do 340. Werner
Yes.
von Braun. Um, so if you have stumbled into this and you have no idea what this is, you are watching a live episode of our long-running, I was going to say award-winning, but we haven't.
No.
No. Our,
Award
our
nominated. We've
award
been
nominated.
award nominated many
Our
times.
long-running, award-nominated Astronomy Cast. So if you want, you can interact with us. You can ask us some questions using the Q&A app. So if you're watching this video somewhere, on YouTube, wherever, it'll say be part of the conversation. Click to join live Q&A on Google Plus Hangout. So if you do that, then you'll see a little place where you can put in some questions, and I will monitor them as we go. Noel Rupenthal says, Werner von Braun, too much KSP for me. So check this out, Noel. How awesome is this, right?
Where did you get that?
From the Kerbal Space Program. They know I'm a huge fan, and they sent me a little Kerbal Space Program space shuttle. So how cool is that? 7, maybe 12. Super cool. We actually used it as a for a video that we did. We brought it in to demonstrate why galaxies have arms, which I know you're wondering. We were talking about if there was a crashed alien saucer, then on the side of the road, then cars would slow down and then speed up as they went past to gape slack-jawed at the crashed alien saucer.
Which
And
is
so,
entirely true and
and,
does actually work with spiral arm formation.
and so this was our crashed alien saucer, and the cars are the stars falling into the density wave. Guido Bieber says this one should have Amy Sherr-Tidal as a guest. Amy Sherr-Tidal is not allowed to do anything that isn't writing her book. So there is no way I'm going to distract her from her writing, from her work. She's got so much work to do. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, let's get rolling. You ready to record?
Yep, I am pressing record. It is recording. It is mono. Life is good. My levels are better than last week, so we're happy. I'm happy.
Right.
I don't know if you're happy.
I'm. If you're happy, I'm happy.
Okay, Preston, we hope you're happy too.
Hi, Preston. Sorry for all the weird, confusing, mixed up audio we're sending at you. We thank you in advance. All right, here we go. Astronomy Cast, episode 340. Ugh, what? I didn't get very far. That's it. We're done. All right, let me try again. Astronomy Cast, episode 340. Werner von Braun. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. My name is Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and with me is Dr. Pamela Gay, a professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Fraser?
Good. It's time for another reminder for the Hangout-a-thon.
On
It's about to happen in a month.
April 26, 27, and we're still doing lots of organization. Yeah, come prepared to support us in our insanity, in our desire to do science. We will do almost anything that is legal.
Right on. I I got nothing. I'm just gonna move on to my intro. All right. So hey, when the United States helped defeat Germany at the end of World War II, they acquired the German rocket scientist Werner von Braun. He had already developed the German V2 rocket program and went on to design all the major hardware of the U.S. rocket program. This week, we talk about von Braun's life and accomplishments. Cool. So, man, where to start? So I hope that most people who are fascinated about space and the Apollo missions and the Gemini program and the Mercury program and all of that are aware of von Braun's influence, involvement. But for those who don't, I mean, who was this guy?
Put simply, he has been described as one of the most controversial, one of the people who history has been rewritten around the most in terms of rocket science. He came from Germany. He came from actually the aristocracy. The von part is because his father was the moral equivalent of a baron. Had the type of upbringing where he went from boarding school to boarding school, went to university, got himself in and out of interesting problems regarding rockets. He'd got a telescope as a child, got extremely interested in it, and kind of like me, just kind of didn't get uninterested. But for him, rockets were the cool part, and he, for instance, was kind of collared by the police when he was young because he took a wagon and attached a bunch of fireworks to it, trying to recreate some of the rocket cars he'd read about. He went to university.
So cool.
He studied mechanical engineering. No, you do not need a PhD in astrophysics to work in the space race. Honestly, go get a degree in mechanical engineering. You'll get a job, unlike the rest of us. Well, it's true.
No, I know. Mechanical, and if that doesn't work out, you can always design HVAC systems for buildings.
Yes, or bridges.
Or bridges.
So he was really inspired. I love the tale of how his life grew. He got a telescope, that got him going. He was doing kind of bad in math and science in school, and he got his hands on a book, Die Rakete zu den Planetariumen. My German teacher is getting ready to throw things at me. Translated, it's By Rocket into Interplanetary Space. And it was a book by Hermann Oberth, who became von Braun's hero and then eventually his mentor as he started to actually work on his PhD, get involved in doing science and rocketry and engineering. And all of this was occurring between the world wars. Unfortunately, after Hitler took power, his life started to enter the land of the truth depends on who you're reading, because history is written by the people who won and researched it. And the research is sometimes meant to meet agendas.
So, I mean, you're sort of insinuating there are sort of two stories here on on von Braun's involvement in Nazi Germany, and was he a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party, or was he?
That's not to be
okay.
Controverted. I'm not sure how to conjugate that. So I think it's not just two stories. I think it's three stories. Extremist story A is he was cool with the Nazis. He hung out. He wore his SS uniform whenever he needed to, showed up to meetings. So that's one extreme. The other extreme, and part of that extreme, which we'll get to later, is that it was he who was purposely sabotaging the V2 program to prevent it from advancing as quickly as it could have. The other side of that is he really didn't like any of this. He was just a scientist, wasn't into politics. He realized if he paid his dues for the Nazi Party, things would go easier for him. He only once ever wore his SS uniform, and it's for the only picture taken of him in the SS uniform. And in that argument, he was simply someone who just wanted to do science, didn't care, kind of disliked all of this. And then what I suspect is true is the truth was in the middle. He was someone who just wanted to build rockets, didn't care about politics so much, but hey, if the Nazis would pay for him to build rockets, he was going to build rockets. Like many other people in Germany at the time, he was witness to atrocities that he realized he couldn't do anything about. He didn't do anything to purposely stop them, didn't do anything to purposely cause them. And in some ways you can argue that's as bad. But I think that's the natural human response. So there's three stories in there, and what you find when you read is nuanced by the fact that there are angry people who want to make anyone who ever carried a Nazi or an SS membership card into an evil demon. And it's also nuanced by the fact that he and 150 other roughly German scientists were brought to America as part of Project Paperclip. They were stuck on a military base. Their arrival in America was kept secret for 5 months, basically, and during that time, the U.S. Army expunged all records of their involvement in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that like when Berlin was taken, when Germany surrendered, the rocket program was split up, right, between the Americans and then the Russians, eventually the Soviets, and so some of the people who had been working on the program were participating in the Soviet program, and others were participating in the U.S. program. And I guess, fortunately for the Americans, von Braun came to the U.S.
And largely that's due to aid from his brother and the fact that Wernher von Braun really wanted to come to America. He was concerned about the harsh working environments that he'd heard about in Soviet Russia, where the scientists were basically being pushed in essentially work camps, was the way it sounded. Ironically, at one point towards the end of World War II, he'd been arrested and held prisoner for 2 weeks. And one of the claims against him was that he had communist sympathies. But as he saw his nation falling, as the Allied troops pushed further and further into central Germany, he managed to get his team distributed through villages in what they hoped would be the path of the Americans. And when his brother, according to some reports, saw an American soldier, his brother on a bicycle called out in broken English that they wanted to surrender, and got them surrendered into the hands of the Americans.
Wow. Okay, so I mean, specifically, he was really involved in, as the war went, with the V2 program, and these were these missiles. Have you seen one in?
Yeah, there's one down at the Smithsonian, and I believe there is one.
I saw one in Germany as well.
Yeah, there's one at the Huntsville Space and Rocket Center where Space Camp is. Yeah, so he wasn't just that rocket. He was working on rockets as part of his research program. I mean, this guy was a researcher prior to getting sucked into the war effort. So he starting in 1931 was part of the German Spaceflight Society. He was working on the Repulsor series of rockets. He was one of the first to develop. It was tiny. It was only about 2 foot, 2/3 of a meter long. It was called the Hunkel-Wickler 1. That was developed with him and another German scientist and launched in 1931. So they were working on these early rockets in the 1930s. He started working on that actually before he finished his bachelor's degree. In 1932, he was working on artillery, kind of because he had to, because it was 1932. He earned his PhD in 1934 after Hitler had come to power. And that was when he also ended up having to start on the A rockets. These were the Aggregate 1 rockets. They used a couple different tanks. They had a gyroscope in their nose. And this is actually where he started using ethanol along with liquid oxygen as a rocket fuel. Rumor has it when things launched correctly, they drank some of the ethanol. So there were 2 A2 rockets, Max and Moritz, that were successfully launched in December of 1934, and they climbed to an altitude of about 6,500 feet. And this was where things really started pushing to get him doing missiles. And so in 1937, there was the new Kummelsdorf liquid fuel rocket and guided missile center that he got put at. It was located on the Baltic Sea, and he was the technical director from then until the end of the war. And this was where they started working on the V2s. This was a project that used basically slave labor, that hideous working environments. It was affiliated.
chemicals that they were dealing with. I mean, it was an awful situation.
Yeah, and it was essentially a work camp for aeronautical work. And the V2 plant was named Mittelwerk. You can look up some of the atrocities from there. It wasn't good. There were more than 60,000 prisoners used to construct missiles, and 25,000 of them died.
Wow.
So more than a third of the people involved died building these rockets.
That's amazing to me that such a technical, complicated, precision project, and they were just doing it with slave labor. I mean,
But think of the people they'd enslaved. These were often very well-educated Jews.
yeah,
So you take a well-educated workforce, threaten to kill them, beat them, starve them while they
kill
were
their
starving.
families. Yeah. No, good point. That's man. So it's just awful. So let's get to the part where the war ended. I guess. So they tested the V2, and then they did
These
fire
were
a
the
couple, right?
Vengeance rockets. Yeah, there was a V2 test launch that was, and was formerly the A4, so they went from A4 to V2. And these were, again, alcohol liquid oxygen rockets. They were 46 feet tall rockets. These were babies, but they reached speeds of 3,500 miles per hour with a maximum range of about 200 miles. And when you start to think that you can see from France to England, that's terrifying.
Yeah, this was a gigantic leap forward with using this kind of technology, because up until this point, like with the V1s, which were like were airplanes, or jet planes, you could stop them because they were flying towards England, and then you would hit the engine stop, and they would crash. But these things, they were on they were on an arc. They would just launch up, they would follow a trajectory, and then they would just come straight down. And at the same time, the Germans were working on a nuclear program. And so can you just imagine that if they had put these two things together and were raining nuclear bombs down on
there were
various
huge
countries.
numbers of these built.
Yeah.
The first successful launch was in 1942, and it wasn't due to, quite often, sabotage from the workforce. And this is where you start to hit the controversy of the good Wernher von Braun encouraged the sabotage because he didn't want to bomb England, and the bad Wernher von Braun didn't want anything to do with the sabotage because he wanted his rockets to fly, and the truth is probably in the middle. But it was in 1944 that the bombings started. It was September 8th, 1944, at 11 a.m. 6 people were killed, 36 were injured. 7 hours later, there was a second. This is all happening in London. And over the next few months, 3,000 rockets were launched.
Oh, yeah.
There were more V2s than all the other rockets since then combined. And 1,358 missiles struck London alone.
Wow. All right. Well, so let's move on then. So I mean, that's the V2 program, and it's just it was devastating, and there was no way to stop it. And so then the Americans and the Soviets, or the Russians, and the Allies retake Berlin, and as you said, they captured a bunch of the rocket scientists, and
he had a team of 500.
Right, and brought them back to the United States. And so then what happened then? What happened?
So in June of 1945, the U.S. Army held pretty much 150 of his team. It may have been all the way up to 500 members of his team. I couldn't find accurate numbers on that. At an interrogation camp in Bavaria. And as they checked out who was useful, 150 of those scientists were selected to come to America. They were transferred to the United States. They were confined to an island base in basically Boston Harbor, while their records were expunged. History was rewritten so that if anyone with the records of the time looked into the background of these scientists, they wouldn't learn the Nazi Party affiliations, the SS affiliations, and so they brought them to America and then resettled them. Von Braun went to Fort Bliss, Texas, and began working on the U.S. ballistic program. In the 1950s, we didn't have NASA. That's one of those things that people often forget. So he served as, Wernher von Braun served as project director, and it was called the Sub-Office for Rockets. And it wasn't just him and his scientists. There were also a number of V-2 rockets that were captured, I guess is the right word, that were brought to America. And there were a lot of test firings and improvements that all happened out at White Sands Missile Arsenal in New Mexico. And according to some stories that I heard while I was at Space Camp as a teenager, and this is, it fits in with the stories of why he got arrested during World War II. Wernher von Braun just wanted to go to space. He just wanted to send humans to space, to get to Mars. And there was, during World War II, a party where apparently he got a bit intoxicated and said that he didn't think that Germany was going to turn out well in this war, and he just wanted to launch humans into space. And this was basically a treasonous act. It's why he was thrown into prison for 2 weeks. Eventually, a bunch of people said, look, Hitler, we need him out of jail. We need his rockets. So he was selected as too important, and so he was able to get away with treasonous statements. Well, the guy is brought to America, and the exact same thing happens. He's told, build deadly missiles. And the story I heard from one of his junior scientists who'd come to America, and at that point was at Redstone Missile Arsenal at Huntsville Space and Rocket Center, he said that Wernher von Braun was always working on, okay, so we're stuck building these ballistic missiles, but that's the same thing as a low orbiting rocket. And so he was building everything with the ability to add a human capsule to the top. And in 1950, he and his team were transferred to Redstone Missile Arsenal in Huntsville, where he was the director of the Guided Missile and Development Program at the Arsenal. They were working on the Redstone rocket program. On the side, he was working on things like designing space stations, as one does. And so when we finally started to realize, thanks to the Soviets launching humans, the expletive, we should be launching humans, and they started trying to figure out, how do we add a capsule to the top of the Redstone missiles? And according to the scientist who was speaking when I was at Space Camp, they'd actually been working on human capsules, and whenever bigwigs came to inspect their facility, they stuck these capsules on a raft and floated them down a river and hid them in a farmer's barn. And I actually pulled up maps of Redstone, and it looks like it could be plausible. There's a river there. There's no reason this couldn't be true. And so when folks came to them and said, we need to launch humans, they were essentially ready to go, which is why we were able to so quickly go from nothing to, we had the Jupiter Cs, we had all of these things, such that we started being able to launch humans, satellites, all of that into space in the 60s, with 61 being the Saturn I rocket, and then of course the Saturn V. And so it was him, these 150 German scientists, and the Americans they brought along for the ride. And he was the head of this program all the way up through the late 60s into the early 70s, when he died of pancreatic cancer.
And so, I mean, when we talk about you said that he came over to the U.S. and started to do essentially the same thing, build rockets. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For killing, and so again, we still have the same dichotomy, right? Where you've got this situation where you've got these, but now they don't have 200 kilometers range. They can drop a missile 10,000 kilometers away. and carrying a nuclear warhead. So I mean that Hitler's wish is now true.
Yeah,
That
he spent 12 years in America designing ballistic missiles before NASA was finally formed in
Yeah,
1958.
that what Hitler, was working towards, the United States and the Soviets
Yeah.
finished off, which is a ballistic missile, an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of dropping a multi-megaton warhead on a target. And that's, so it's, I mean, we as space nerds are so excited about the flight side of it, but this is all just done under this, I don't know, like under this umbrella
It's the
of
same
the most
technology.
elaborate killing machine that's that has ever been conceived, and still
And
kind
this,
of hangs over our heads today. So
yeah, this is a story that gets repeated. We didn't know about adaptive optics for telescopes, despite their existence and their ability to be applied to astronomy, until the Challenger explosion, where some of the adaptive optics images were accidentally released. Um, there's so many times,
GPS,
yeah,
you
the
know,
military has vast budgets that those of us who want to do science and explore can't even imagine.
there is a whole other program of space flight run by the military
Yeah.
that we barely are able to report on. Every now and then we get glimpses of some of the launches and some of the landings, and we hear about some of the missions. There's space planes, all kinds of things. There's a whole
Yeah.
other program. So anyway, I mean that always troubles me. I mean, I'm very enthusiastic by nature, and I try to really temper it with just this kind of recognition of the war part of all of this technology.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's continue. So he, builds all these war machines, whether he wanted to or whether he was begrudgingly, and depending on how
Yeah.
you tell the story, but and then went on to really build all of these missions. But what were sort of the big ones? What were the big, real technical leaps forward that he really worked on?
I really think Saturn V, full stop. His team developed the heaviest lift rocket that has thus far existed. And looking beyond that, it was his ability to inspire. This is someone that when you go through the historic records, you find pictures of the space stations he designed, the work he did with Walt Disney and Disney Studios to try and encourage space exploration, the inspiration that he was for the design of the space shuttle, the conversations he had with Kennedy. He knew how to manipulate the politicians into paying for his space exploration. But he also understood the human side, the like I said, the engaging with Walt Disney. Wernher von Braun was the person who was behind the formation of Space Camp down at the Huntsville Space and Rocket Center, which really they were kind of formed together at Marshall Space Flight Center. So you have this person that over and over wanted to just get people dreaming of space, like him as a child with his telescope and strapping fireworks to his wagon and getting collared by the police and held until his parents came to get him. But then you also have the dichotomy of this is someone descended from royalty who came from the aristocracy, who was a one percenter essentially in Germany before the concept of one percenter existed. And he lived multiple lives, and I don't know if we'll ever know which of those was the true Wernher von Braun.
I love as well that he had thought through missions well beyond the kinds of missions that
He was going to Mars.
Yeah, he was going to Mars. He was Elon Musking it, right? He had already plotted out what was going to happen after the Apollo program, after there was going to be the space stations, and then there was going to be missions to asteroids and manned missions to Venus,
If
to
he
orbit.
had died at age 65, he was still sharp. He was still running the Apollo technical program. If he hadn't, when he was diagnosed with cancer, if he hadn't died I mean, 65 isn't young, but you still are like, oh, he could have had another 20 years.
Yeah.
And where would we be if his leadership, if his savvy, if his ability to sway, and he was one of those rugged Germans with a full head of hair who captivated in the photos he's arresting. And all of those things are needed to lead. Where could we have gone if we'd kept his leadership?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's some great overviews, write-ups of some of these missions and some of his mission plans and what he planned to do for Mars and further. And a lot of these missions that we still have, the Hubble, Cassini, the Voyager program, a lot of these had their genesis in a lot of the mission plans that von Braun and his team had come up with, and the flight hardware and things like that. It's quite amazing how long-lasting the sort of his developments had gone even till now.
And Elon Musk, who's a South African developing for the U.S. and the world's space programs from his headquarters out in California, he sent his engineers to basically crawl around the remaining Apollos and learn everything they could, because a lot of the plans from the Apollos have just been misplaced over the years. And so we're still trying to learn as much as we can from this leader of the early American space program, of the German missile program. It's a complicated story.
Yeah. Well, I think we're out of time, so thank you very much, Pamela.
My pleasure. And ending the recording.
Don't go anywhere. Save. That's 340.
Yep, I need to renumber the file, but I figured that was easier than relaunching GarageBand.
And then export, and then upload, and then we can talk.
So audience, you don't go anywhere either.
Yeah, whatever you do, don't go anywhere.
There we go, little file that needs renamed. No, seriously, change your name.
Oh, that file.
Yeah. Okay, there it goes. Dropbox is simply having a moment.
We are safe, but for how long?
Yes.
Okay, Guido Bibra says there's a very good BBC three-part miniseries called Space Race, which depicts the race from the perspectives of Wernher von Braun and Sergei Korolev, and was fairly accurately historically and co-produced with German and Russian television stations. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I am going to go dig that up and watch it. Done. Guido, thank you. Okay, Lance INTJ says, I would miss the episode where Astronomy Cast honors Wernher von Braun. I keep going Werner. I'm sure it's Werner. The gentleman or entire space program too. Someone actually said how to pronounce it, but their description of how to pronounce it is, I don't know. Guido, you could probably do it. Okay. Tatiana Valevska. I was good every week.
Tatiana.
I know Tatiana part. So, do you believe that we need 3 more planets to survive as human species? Have you heard about that? About the fact that we don't have enough resources on planet Earth for the amount that we're using, and that we really need 3 more planets to kind of fully absorb the impact of human beings.
I believe firmly in planned population. I mean, the global climate meeting this week, they presented models showing that while we're looking at improved growing conditions in Canada, northern Russia, the mid-latitudes of the globe are pretty exploitived.
Yeah.
And this is going to affect our ability to produce enough food to sustain our global population. I know lots of scientists who've chosen not to have children because they understand those models. And I think what we need to consider is scaling back rather than scaling up.
We are beyond our natural ability to sort of, the best example is that we're driving the car's going really fast, and we're going towards a cliff, and we are beyond the ability to put on the brakes. So literally now it's all going to come down to technology. I mean, we're looking at the various solar technology, methods of pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. I mean, as much
Yeah.
as it sucks, we've passed all of the chances to do things in the safe way, and now we're moving into the ways which are Hail Mary passes. We don't know how they're going to turn out, and if the technology doesn't kind of slot into place, then we're going to start to go through changes in sort of global environment, and that
And
sucks.
the places that it sucks the most are the developing world, where all the rest of us got to go through this massive period of industrial growth where we just polluted everything without any regard to what we were doing to the world, to the environment, because we just didn't understand what we were doing or didn't care.
Yeah.
And
Well, we know
now
now. Now we're
we know
demonstrating that we
now.
don't care.
But now we have a lot of the developing world, they don't get the chance to build the cheap infrastructure that pollutes the tar out of everything. They have to leapfrog without financial aid, in a lot of cases, straight to clean energies. And they're not going to be able to do that in some cases. So how do you advance?
Rich Hayward asks, I wonder what Wernher von Braun, would think about NASA today. What do you think? What do you think he'd think about NASA today?
I think he'd be disappointed at the lack of spine.
Yeah. I think he had it all figured out. He had put together a whole series of natural steps that you would take after you went to the moon. That was just like step one of landing humans on another planet. Time to go to Mars. Time to send humans to asteroids. Let's get rocking. And that all just came apart. And it's been 45 years, and we haven't been back to the moon, right?
It's not been
So,
45 years. I'm not that old. Has it
uh,
been? No, because I'm thinking of Soyuz.
yeah,
Soyuz was the year I
yeah,
was born.
69,
You're right.
yes,
You're right. It has.
45 years.
Dang.
Yeah, right? So, 45 years of, like, think about it, right? Like, Mercury, like, what, 3 years, 2 years? Gemini, 2 years, 3 years? The Apollo program, up to
There's
69. Then the,
5 generations between the Apollo astronauts and the children being born this year.
mhm. So there should have been, 74 an asteroid, maybe 77 a lunar base, 85 human mission to Mars. Like this was the plan. And
Yeah.
so he would be devastated to see where we're at now. Now, it's not necessarily possible that his ideas were in any way realistic. I mean, his Battlestar Galactica, gigantic endeavor to go to Mars would have
Kind of
bankrupted the United
insane.
States. But yeah, I think he was hoping things were going to continue. But once the political things had been met, the U.S. pulled back from the program. So yeah, I think he'd be bummed. Do you agree?
I do agree.
Okay. I
It's,
don't want to speak
yeah,
for
I'm
you.
just kind of speechless when it comes to this stuff.
I know you're too deep in it. Elon Musk. Just think Elon Musk. Just think
Well,
about.
so one of the things that I learned last week, sorry, I have a dog opening a door in the corner. One of the things I learned last week is one of the commercial space agencies sold a $150 ticket to be one of the first uh, tourists to go around the moon. And that broke my heart because that's more money than NASA has for all of its education, communication, citizen science stuff. Um, one person spent that money to be a passenger.
How much?
150 million was the report I got.
Wow. Um, Tom Nathy says Von Braun comes across as a pragmatic person, willing to look the other way in order to get what he wanted to do. That sounds pretty right to me. I think
Yeah,
that because he sort of did the same thing that he always wanted to go to space, and And if you were in the rocket business, that was eventually going to take you to space, but you'd have to create some killing machines in the short
Yeah,
term.
if anyone out there is a computer scientist, you may understand this. It's kind of like when you have a client come to you and say, develop software to do this, 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 and you're like, okay, so your customers are going to want these three features. And they're like, no, 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 you don't need to do that. We don't want to pay for that. And so you write your code so that it'll be very easy to add those three features because you know the moment the code goes live, the customers are going to go insane because X, Y, and Z are missing. And you know the client's going to come to you and go, we really need, and so you just build the code with that architected in, even if it's not fully implemented. And I think he built rockets with human space flight ready to plug and play.
Nancy Graziano says she's the moderator of the Facebook Astronomy Cast community. Thank you, Nancy, for your ongoing support. We really appreciate it. Who do you think is today's Von Braun, or don't we have one?
Elon Musk.
Well, Elon Musk is more of an entrepreneur and more of a kind of a visionary of like the larger
But if you look
plan.
at how culture has evolved, I don't think that we can have a pragmatic, sweet-talking the politicians and the Congress and the military into here is where we're going. I don't think we have the culture to do it, and I think given the modern socioeconomic situation, Elon Musk is today's answer for how we get things pragmatically completed.
So I agree, and then I think the question is who is the sort of top engineer at SpaceX? Because I'm sure a lot of the ideas are coming from there, but the fact that we don't know his name offhand or her name offhand tells us, right?
I think the open source community has changed how. I don't think there's any one person anymore. And I think with Wernher von Braun, it was one guy taking the credit for 150 people working together.
Right.
And that gets forgotten.
And that's kind of Elon Musk as well. I mean, I guess Elon Musk says, I think we can make a rocket take off and land again and only have to refuel it, figure out how. And the team is working on and on their way there. I'm, how close they are to that technological advancement is mind-bending to me.
Right. 2015 heavy lift.
Brent Haynes asks, where and how do you do your audio? Is it your mics through your computer?
Yes.
Yes. So that's mine. I use a Blue Snowball.
And I use a different Blue.
Yeah, I use a Yeti, right?
No. My Yeti's upstairs. This is, I think, a Snowbird.
Okay.
And then I have an Icicle USB adapter.
These USB condenser mics are the greatest advancement in audio. We have been battling audio issues since we started this podcast, and now that we can not have to go through a preamp and just go right into the computer through the USB is just taken so much of our misery away. So, if you want to start a podcast, get one of these Blue microphones. Something Blue. Yeah, whatever's in your price range. They do not pay us any money. We just love the gear.
And between the two of us, we have the Yeti, the Snowbird, and the Snowball.
Yes. Let's see. The Snowball's great. It's just heavy, and it looks kind of like a bomb when I take it through the airport. So they always want me to take the thing out and show it to them and show them that it's a microphone. So if it had a more microphone-y shape, that would probably be better.
The Yeti just is like, you could kill someone with it if you hit it.
Yeah.
This one's much lighter weight, and it has a little bit better range for when I'm doing audiobooks.
Simon Love says, so many alternate timelines to think about with this episode, food for thought. I think that's great, right? That just like, what if von Braun was captured by the Soviets instead of the Americans? What if
Germany had won the war?
Germany had got the nuclear program going and was raining hundreds of nuclear weapons on their enemies? There's no question they would have used it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Richard Drum says, and get a pop filter.
Yes, yeah. And if you have a pop filter and it doesn't always help, what Richard taught me is rotate your microphone relative to your face because I will pop given any opportunity to pop.
Actually, I found this snowball doesn't require a pop filter. I mean, it's
Yeah.
got one kind of built in, maybe, but I don't pop so badly on this one. So, and Richard agrees. Musk equals Tony Stark. Um, let me see what else we got here. Nothing there. Nothing there.
I'm not seeing anything on Twitter.
No? Okay. Well, I know we sort of. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, Tom Nathan says someone like Dr. Chang Diaz of Ad Astra. So he
Yeah.
was an astronaut and is working on this Vasimir propulsion system, which is a new propulsion system, and could help missions get to Mars much more quickly. And so, absolutely. But I think of that more. I mean, von Braun was really, was an integrator. He thought of the whole big picture, and Diaz is focusing on this one propulsion system. So, yeah, it is Musk, isn't it? It is Musk. Musk is the von Braun of our age. Maybe scaled composites as well.
So there you have Scaled Composites was
They won the
oh
X
man,
Prize.
I've lost the name of their engineer. But Virgin Galactic is Richard Branson, and there I think you have pure entrepreneurialism. Burt Rutan.
Yeah.
And I think Burt Rutan had a good vision when he won the Anasazi X Prize, Ansari X Prize rather, and it got complicated by we're doing tours and we're going to start selling tickets, and the looking beyond the taking off and landing in New Mexico got lost in there somewhere.
Yeah. Richard says I do pop just at the beginning of the show. Okay. Thanks, Richard. I apologize. All right. I think we're good. There's a few comments. Actually, it was great. Lots of conversation. All right, well, let's wrap things up then. So, Pamela, once again, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to share your brain. For those of you who didn't hear me talk about this before, I want to recommend that you drop whatever you're doing, go to either Google Play or the iOS store and download a free game called Space Team. And this game, the way it works is that it's you're on your portable device and your friend is on their portable device, and you are trying to work together as a space team and you're essentially barking orders at the other person. So you're telling them to recombinate the Jargonator, to release the prisoners, to set the viral fluctor at 7, and the other person has to do these, and you have to sort of, sometimes they're on your control panel, sometimes they're on their control panel, and if you get enough of these things right, then you advance to the next level. Then there's like asteroids that you have to dodge and wormholes that you have to go through, and your control panel starts to fall apart, and there's space goo, and it is so much fun, and you can only play it in the same room, either via Bluetooth or on Wi-Fi. It is hilarious. So,
and if you want to learn real science, you can download, and we do charge for this because it's how we support our programs. If you want to help feed Joe, our JavaScript ninja, download the Earth or Not Earth app. It's available both for Android and for iPhone, and you're helping fund the creation of more citizen science projects when you do that.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap this up. So thanks again, Pamela. What's next? Learning Space?
What's next? No. What's next is in 3 hours. It's the Google Lunar X Prize Team Hangouts. We're hopefully going to have someone on from Moon Express. We're not entirely sure. But we're also going to bring in some folks from the Google Lunar X Prize itself to discuss what are the milestones, what are the reach goals, what's involved with winning this commercial race to the moon.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Pamela.
See you later. Hello, how are you doing?
Good. Part 2 of our action-packed 2-part episode in reverse chronological order. So we just had an interview with Sandy for episode 341, and now we're going to do 340. Wernher von Braun. So if you have stumbled into this and you have no idea what this is, you are watching a live episode of our long-running, I was going to say award-winning, but we haven't.
No.
No. Our
Award nominated.
Award
nominated many
our
times.
long-running, award-nominated Astronomy Cast. So if you want, you can interact with us. You can ask us some questions using the Q&A app. So if you're watching this video somewhere, YouTube, wherever, it'll say be part of the conversation. Click to join live Q&A on Google Plus Hangout. So if you do that, then you'll see a little place where you can put in some questions, and I will monitor them as we go. Noel Rupenthal says, Werner von Braun, too much KSP for me. So check this out, Noel. How awesome is this, right?
Where did you get that?
From the Kerbal Space Program. They know I'm a huge fan, and they sent me a little Kerbal Space Program space shuttle. So how cool is that? 7, maybe 12. Super cool. We actually used it as for a video that we did. We brought it in to demonstrate why you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. My name is Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and with me is Dr. Pamela Gay, a professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Fraser?
Good. It's time for another reminder for the Hangout-a-thon.
On
about to happen in
April 26, 27, and we're still doing lots of organization. Yeah, come prepared to support us in our insanity, in our desire to do science. We will do almost anything that is legal.
Right on. I got nothing. I'm just gonna move on to my intro. All right. So hey, when the United States helped defeat Germany at the end of World War II, they acquired the German rocket scientist Werner von Braun. He had already developed the German V-2 rocket program and went on to design all the major hardware of the U.S. rocket program. This week, we talk about von Braun's life and accomplishments. Cool. So, man, where to start? So I hope that most people who are fascinated about space and the Apollo missions and the Gemini program and the Mercury program and all of that are aware of von.
Yes, or Bridges.
Or Bridges.
So he was really inspired. I love the tale of how his life grew. He got a telescope that got him going. He was doing kind of bad in math and science in school, and he got his hands on a book, Die Rakete zu den Planetarumen. My German teacher is getting ready to throw things at me. Translated, it's By Rocket into Interplanetary Space. And it was a book by Hermann Oberth, who became von Braun's hero and then eventually his mentor as he started to actually work on his PhD, get involved in doing science and rocketry and engineering. And all of this was occurring between the world wars. Unfortunately, after Hitler took power, his life started to enter the land of the truth depends on who you're reading, because history is written by the people who won and researched it. And the research is sometimes meant to meet agendas.
So, I mean, you're sort of insinuating there are sort of two stories here on on von Braun's involvement in Nazi Germany, and was he a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party, or was he?
That's not to be
okay.
Controverted. I'm not sure how to conjugate that. So I think
galaxies have arms, which I know you're wondering. We were talking about if there was a crashed alien saucer, then on the side of the road, then cars would slow down and then speed up as they went past to gape slack-jawed at the crashed alien saucer.
Which is entirely true and does actually work with spiral arm formation. And
so this was our crashed alien saucer, and the cars are the stars falling into the density wave. Guido Bieber says this one should have Amy Sherr-Tidal as a guest. Amy Sherr-Tidal is not allowed to do anything that isn't writing her book. So there is no way I'm going to distract her from her writing, from her work. She's got so much work to do. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, let's get rolling. You ready to record?
Yep, I am pressing record. It is recording. It is mono. Life is good. My levels are better than last week, so we're happy. I'm happy.
Right.
I don't know if you're happy.
I'm. If you're happy, I'm happy.
Okay, Preston, we hope you're happy too.
Hi, Preston. Sorry for all the weird, confusing, mixed up audio we're sending at you. We thank you in advance. All right, here we go. Astronomy Cast, episode 340. Ugh, what? I didn't get very far. That's it. We're done. All right, let me try again. Astronomy Cast, episode 340. Wernher von Braun. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help Braun's influence, involvement. But for those who don't, I mean, who was this guy?
Put simply, he has been described as one of the most controversial, one of the people who history has been rewritten around the most in terms of rocket science. He came from Germany. He came from actually the aristocracy. The von part is because his father was the moral equivalent of a baron. Had the type of upbringing where he went from boarding school to boarding school, went to university, got himself in and out of interesting problems regarding rockets. He'd got a telescope as a child, got extremely interested in it, and kind of like me, just kind of didn't get uninterested. But for him, rockets were the cool part, and he, for instance, was kind of collared by the police when he was young because he took a wagon and attached a bunch of fireworks to it, trying to recreate some of the rocket cars he'd read about. He went to university.
So cool.
He studied mechanical engineering. No, you do not need a PhD in astrophysics to work in the space race. Honestly, go get a degree in mechanical engineering. You'll get a job, unlike the rest of us. Well, it's true.
No, I know. I know. Mechanical, and if that doesn't work out, you can always design HVAC systems for buildings.